I sometimes think the hardest part of looking back is realizing how long I kept quiet. How many years I let myself believe that silence was the same as peace, and that obedience was the same as love. When people asked me now, carefully, like stepping near a bruise, how I stayed with him for so long, I never know how to answer in a way that makes sense. I'm almost 40, but when I speak about those years, I still feel 14 in some ways. 14 and dazzled. 14 and proud that someone older had chosen me. 14 and so desperately unprepared for the way a life can twist. Even now, when I wake too early and the house is quiet, I can feel the echo of my old bedroom in my mother's house, the cheap floral curtains, the smell of warm laundry, the radio playing softly through the wall. Sometimes I feel that if I opened my eyes, I'd see it again. Back when everything felt like a promise instead of a warning. Before I knew anything about control or isolation or the way love can tighten around your throat without ever leaving a mark. But I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm supposed to start at the beginning, or as close to the beginning as memory will let me. The year I turned 14, nothing extraordinary had ever happened to me. I was an ordinary girl in an ordinary town where summers smelled like asphalt and cut grass, and winters meant waiting for the school bus with my hands curled into my sleeves. I had 2 close friends who talked mostly about boys they liked and teachers they hated, and a mother who worked long hours at the grocery store. My father lived 2 states away with a woman he'd married after leaving us, and we spoke on birthdays if he remembered. I wasn't unhappy, exactly, but there was nothing in my world that felt larger than the edges of our subdivision. Then he appeared. His name was Daniel, though back then everyone in town seemed to call him Danny. He was 18, which to me might as well have been some glamorous, unreachable age of adulthood. He had a car, an old blue Chevy that idled too loudly, and he wore that confidence older teenagers always seem to have, the kind that made teachers sigh and girls whisper. He didn't go to parties or hang out at the mall like the other boys his age. He worked part-time with his uncle's construction crew, lifting lumber with the ease of someone who'd learned to use his strength early. The first time I saw him, he was waiting outside the hardware store as I walked past after school. I remember the glare of the sun off the car's windshield, and how he leaned against the door as though he'd been sculpted into that pose. He looked up, saw me, and smiled, not the big toothy kind of smile boys my age use, but something quieter, steadier. Like he'd been expecting me. I kept walking, cheeks burning, wondering if maybe I'd imagined it. But the next afternoon, he was there again, and this time he spoke. "You're Lisa, right?" he said, straightening from the car. I nodded, stunned he knew my name. "I've seen you walking this way. You've got a quick step." I didn't know what that meant, but I laughed lightly, tucking my hair behind my ear the way girls do when they don't know what to do with their hands. He asked what school I went to, what grade I was in, what music I liked. Simple questions, nothing special, but the way he looked at me, like he saw something extraordinary, made me feel taller, older, different. And then the gifts started. The first was a silver bracelet, delicate and thin, nothing flashy. He handed it to me one day as though it were nothing more than a token, saying, "Saw this and thought of you." I should have questioned it. My mother would have questioned it. But at 14, I thought it meant something beautiful, that someone older found me worth giving things to. He asked me to go for ice cream with him a week later. My friends squealed when I told them, insisting it was the most romantic thing ever. My mother, on the other hand, hesitated. She asked how old he was. When I told her, her face tightened almost imperceptibly. "He's too old for you," she said, crossing her arms as though bracing against the cold wind. 14-year-old girls don't date 18-year-old boys." "It's not a date," I protested. "It's just ice cream." But it was a date, and we both knew it. I think back to that first outing often. The small wooden booth at the ice cream parlor, the way his knee brushed mine under the table, the soft hum of the freezer behind the counter. He watched me so intently that I felt warm all over, like his attention itself was a blanket I didn't want to slip from my shoulders. He told me I had the kind of smile that made people want to tell me secrets. And I believed him. He drove me home slowly that night, as though he wanted time to stretch. Before I got out of the car, he said, "I'm glad you came. You're different from other girls." I didn't ask what he meant. I didn't want to ruin the spell. My mother was waiting on the porch. Daniel waved politely, and she forced a smile in return. I could tell she didn't like him, though she didn't say anything until later, when she came into my room and sat on the edge of my bed. "He's too old," she repeated softly. "And boys that age don't usually spend time with girls your age for the right reasons." But all I could think about was how safe he'd made me feel. How special. At 14, no one had ever made me feel that way. My friends liked boys who teased them or sent awkward notes in class. But Daniel, he made me feel chosen. Seen. Elevated. Over the next year, he became an anchor in my life. He drove me to school some mornings, claiming it was on his way. He brought me small gifts, a necklace, a scarf, a book he thought I'd like. My friends were dazzled. They envied me, and I basked in it. My mother worried, but she worked so much that our conversations became quick exchanges in the kitchen, her voice tight with concern and mine eager to defend something I didn't understand yet. By the time I was 16, Daniel and I were inseparable. He said he loved me. I said it back, not because I understood what love was, but because I couldn't imagine anything more perfect than his attention. Looking back, I realize how small my world was. How much of myself I gave away without knowing the value of what I was trading. He took me on long drives to the lake on Saturdays. We'd sit on the hood of his car, watching the water shimmer under the fading sun. He talked about the future, about how he wanted a stable home, a loyal wife, someone who wouldn't ever hurt him the way others had. His words were soft, but they landed heavy, like obligations disguised as devotion. One evening, as we sat there watching the sky darken, he turned to me with that serious look he sometimes got. "I don't trust everyone," he said. "People can be jealous, or manipulative. But you're pure. You're steady. I need that." The way he said it made my heart flutter. I felt honored, chosen to be his source of peace. I didn't understand that this was the beginning of something else entirely. When I turned 20, he proposed. The ring was beautiful, far too expensive for his salary. I cried as he slid it onto my finger, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what I thought was love. My mother cried too, but not for the same reason. I didn't recognize the grief in her eyes back then. I thought she was just scared of losing me. The wedding was small. Daniel said big weddings were unnecessary displays. He preferred something intimate. I thought it was romantic. I thought everything he did had a meaning wrapped in tenderness. Our first weeks of marriage felt dreamlike. He held me close at night. He told me I was the center of his universe. He praised the meals I made, saying no restaurant could compare. I felt like I had finally stepped into the life I'd been meant for. But then, slowly, things began to shift. It started small, so small I barely noticed. A comment about how one of my friends was a bad influence. A suggestion that I didn't need to visit my mother so often. A playful remark about how I didn't need a job. "Why work when I can take care of you?" he'd say, kissing my forehead. Little threads pulled one by one, until my world was woven entirely around him. And then came the first rule. Then the second. Then the third. But that's getting ahead. There's a moment, very early in our marriage, that I think of often. A tiny moment, but one that, looking back, was the first real warning. It happened on a Tuesday evening, just after dinner, when I mentioned wanting to call my mother. Daniel paused, plate in his hand, and turned his head slightly, listening in a way that made my stomach tighten. "What would you talk to her about?" he asked. I remember how the air seemed to thicken. I remember how I suddenly wished I hadn't said anything at all. And then, just as he was waiting for my answer, the phone rang. He didn't move when the phone rang. He just stood there, plate lingering in his hand, his eyes fixed on me like he was trying to read a confession off my face. I murmured something about probably nothing, maybe my mother checking in, but the words felt flimsy and guilty even though I had nothing to feel guilty about. The phone kept ringing, and the sound filled the space between us like a warning bell. Then he set the plate down with a soft, deliberate tap and said, "Go ahead. Answer." I should have felt relieved. Permission granted. But something in the tone, too smooth, too controlled, made my nerves prickle. I picked up the phone with a hand I hoped didn't shake and said hello. It really was just my mother, asking about a sewing machine she'd found at a yard sale, wondering if I wanted it. Nothing dramatic. Nothing secret. But as I talked, Daniel stood a few feet behind me, not touching me, not saying a word, just listening. Watching. When I got off the phone, he wrapped his arms around me as if nothing had happened. "I'm just protective," he whispered into my hair. "Your mom, she gets in your head sometimes. I want us to be strong, just you and me." His embrace felt warm, but my body didn't soften. Something inside me went rigid, like a splinter I couldn't push out. Still, I told myself I was imagining it. I was newly married. These were small things, practically nothing. That's what I told myself again and again. Over the months that followed, the small things continued. A friend invited me to lunch. He told me she only wanted gossip. A coworker from a part-time job I'd briefly taken said he missed seeing me. Daniel insisted the man had ulterior motives. My mother asked if she could stop by. Daniel said he was tired and needed quiet. It was always framed as protection, concern, love. And I, still so naive, still so certain I had won some rare kind of devotion, absorbed it all without question. By 22, the life I lived was smaller than I could have ever imagined at 14. I woke early to make his breakfast. I cleaned the house, even though it barely needed it. I waited for him to come home so I could serve dinner. I didn't have a job. "A good marriage doesn't need two incomes," he said. "Besides, your presence keeps me grounded." He said it often enough that I began to believe it. As though my purpose was to be the still point in his universe, the one quiet place he could return to. At first, I found comfort in the routine. There was predictability, a sense of being needed. And when he praised me, when he took my hand across the dinner table and said, "No one has ever taken care of me the way you do," the warmth of it filled whatever emptiness I didn't know was forming. But slowly, quietly, the praise turned conditional. If the house wasn't cleaned properly, his voice grew tight. If dinner wasn't exactly the way he liked it, he'd push the plate aside. If I looked tired, he'd ask if I wasn't sleeping well because I spent too much time on the phone. If I said I wanted to visit my mother, he'd sigh heavily, like I'd just dropped a burden onto his shoulders. Little corrections. Little punishments. Little silences that froze the air between us. I didn't notice how much of myself I was losing until one morning, standing in front of the bathroom mirror, I realized I hadn't chosen my own clothes in months. I wore what he liked, what he complimented, what he didn't criticize. Buttoned shirts, pale colors, nothing too bold. I had become, without realization, a version of myself filtered through his preferences. Still, I thought it was love. Years passed like that, slow and thick, like honey poured too long from the same jar. Days blended into one another. I rarely saw my friends. Most had given up reaching out. I spoke to my mother only occasionally, always with Daniel in earshot, always careful not to say anything that might make him tense. Looking back now, at almost 40, I can see how deeply isolated I had become. But at the time, I believed isolation was safety. I believed that being protected meant staying small. The breaking point, though I didn't recognize it as such at first, began on an ordinary Wednesday. I had been cleaning the living room, vacuum humming, sunlight sliding across the carpet, when my phone lit up. A notification from a social media app one rarely used anymore. I wiped my hands on my apron and picked it up. The message came from a man I didn't know. His profile picture showed a middle-aged guy with kind eyes and a shy smile, maybe someone who worked in sales or insurance. The message was simple. "Hi, sorry if this is strange. I just came across your profile. You have a really warm smile. Hope you're having a good day. I froze. It was harmless. Polite. Not flirtatious beyond a generic compliment. Under normal circumstances, I might have ignored it and forgotten about it 5 minutes later. But married life with Daniel had trained me to feel guilt even for breathing wrong. My first thought wasn't curiosity, it was fear. I deleted the notification. I didn't respond. I didn't even open the app again. I told myself it meant nothing. But the message lingered in my mind like a faint echo. Warm smile. Kind eyes. It stirred something I hadn't felt in a decade, some ancient memory of being acknowledged for something other than obedience. Being seen, rather than monitored. And strangely, unsettlingly, I felt awake. Just a little. Just enough to realize how long I'd been asleep. I pushed the thought away. I resumed cleaning. I made dinner as usual. I didn't tell Daniel anything. But the next morning, when he left for work, I checked my phone again. The man had sent a second message, not insistent, not demanding. Just, sorry if that was inappropriate. I didn't mean to bother you. Something in me tightened painfully. Not because I wanted him. Not because he offered anything. But because he apologized to me, without anger, without suspicion, without making me feel like I'd done something wrong. It was such a small thing. But sometimes the smallest things are the loudest. I didn't reply. I deleted the conversation again. I told myself it was over. It wasn't. 3 days later, 3 days in which I barely slept, barely breathed, Daniel came home early. I didn't hear the car. I didn't know he was there until he spoke from the doorway in a voice so quiet it knit my stomach into knots. What's this? He held my phone in his hand. Unlocked. Screen glowing. The message thread open. Apparently, deleting an app doesn't erase everything if you don't know where to look. I felt my heartbeat throb in my ears. I didn't answer him. I said immediately. I don't know who he is. I swear I didn't. His voice exploded across the room. Not loud, not at first, but sharp, slicing through my words. Don't lie to me. I'm not lying. He stepped closer. The air changed. The walls seemed to lean inward. Every instinct in my body told me to stay still, to breathe softly, to not provoke whatever storm was gathering behind his eyes. You're cheating, he said. You're embarrassing me. You're making a fool out of this marriage. I shook my head so fast my neck ached. I didn't even respond. That's worse, he snapped. You wanted him to chase you. My mouth opened and closed like a fish pulled from water. I couldn't make him understand because he did not want to understand. He wanted to be betrayed. He wanted an enemy, so he could punish the sin he'd invented. That night blurred into something I still sometimes wake up sweating from. He shouted. He shouted something, maybe a glass, maybe a picture frame. I don't remember. He told me I disgusted him. He told me I was ungrateful, selfish, stupid. I stood there, trembling, unable to defend myself because I had never learned how. When he finally stopped yelling, he left the house, slamming the door so hard the floor trembled. I collapsed on the kitchen tiles, pressing my hands to my face, wanting to disappear into the grout. For the first time, a thin, cold voice inside me whispered, "This is not love." But the next morning, he came back with roses. Cheap ones, the kind from the grocery store, but at the time, they felt like a peace treaty. His apology was soft, shaking. He said he'd just been scared of losing me. He asked why I made him so afraid. And like an idiot still living in the shadow of 14, I apologized to him. The weeks after that incident were no longer honey slow. They were tight, tense, suffocating. He watched me constantly. He checked my phone daily. He forbade me from using social media at all. He questioned every moment I spent alone. My world, already small, shrank to the size of his shadow. And then came the first night where the house didn't feel like a home at all. More like a sealed box. more like a place where breathing needed permission. Because one evening, after he'd been oddly quiet for hours, he walked up behind me and closed his hand over my phone. Just took it. Slipped it into his pocket. Withdrew the keys from my purse right after. No more risks, he said. And I realized, truly realized, I had no way out. Not yet. Because I didn't know then that a small crack was coming. A chance. A moment sharp and thin as a thread. But it started with something else. A voice. One I hadn't heard in weeks. My mother's voice, whispering my name. But not in a dream. Not in memory. In a voicemail I wasn't supposed to receive. I didn't even know the voicemail was there at first. Daniel had taken my phone again that morning before leaving for work, slipping it into his jacket pocket like it was nothing more than a misplaced spoon he needed to carry with him. He told me he'd return it. When you can be trusted. A phrase that made something in me snap quietly, like a thread pulled too tight. But that afternoon, while folding laundry in the bedroom, I found my old phone, my very first one, at the back of the closet, inside a shoebox of high school mementos. It hadn't been used in years. The battery was dead. The charger was gone. Still, I held it in my hands like a piece of contraband, a relic of a version of me who had once believed freedom was an unremarkable thing. I knew Daniel wouldn't be home for hours. He rarely returned before 6 on weekdays. So I dug through drawers, through boxes, through anything I thought might hide the old charger. When I finally found it, tangled in a knot of cables behind the TV stand, I plugged it in with trembling hands. The phone lit up. Dim at first. Then brighter. 2 unheard voicemails. Both from my mother. The first was her usual gentle tone, checking in, asking if I was okay, saying she missed me. The kind of message I'd heard 100 times in my life. But the second, left the day Daniel had taken my primary phone from me, was different. "Lisa," she whispered, her voice tight with worry. "I know something's wrong. You don't have to tell me anything. Just let me know you're alive. Please, honey. I'm scared." My throat closed. I sank to the carpet, holding the phone to my chest like it might dissolve if I loosened my grip. I wanted to call her immediately, to tell her I was okay, or at least breathing. But I hesitated. The fear was too large, too real. If the phone rang while Daniel was here, if he walked in early again, he would take it, break it, accuse me of secrets, of betrayal, of treason against our marriage. He would twist the meaning of everything I did, everything I said. But her voice, that whisper, it cracked something open inside me. Later that night, after Daniel came home, after he made a show of inspecting the house, as if searching for evidence of rebellion, and after he finally fell asleep on the couch with the TV droning, I crept back to the bedroom. The old phone was fully charged now. My hands shook as I stared at it. Calling felt too risky. A call could ring. A call could be overheard. A call could ruin me. So I texted her. Just 3 words. "I need help." I didn't hear from her right away. My old phone service was spotty at best, but the message went through. And that alone filled me with a trembling mixture of dread and hope. Daniel didn't suspect anything that night. But the next morning brought a new level of tension. He didn't take my phone this time, he kept it. He didn't lock the door, he replaced the lock entirely, installing a keyless deadbolt he controlled with a code he wouldn't share. He moved through the house with a steadiness that unnerved me, humming under his breath. Overly gentle. Overly quiet. Like someone handling a fragile object he hadn't decided whether to protect or crush. "Things will be better now," he said before leaving for work, brushing his lips against my forehead. "We're starting fresh." His footsteps faded. The door clicked shut. And the silence that followed felt dangerous. I checked the old phone immediately. A message from my mother had arrived overnight. "I'm coming over." My heart lurched. She couldn't come here. She couldn't walk into this house. Daniel might return unexpectedly. He might see her. He might. A second message came through. Don't worry. I have a plan. Don't open the door for anyone except me. I sank into the kitchen chair, pulse jumping. My mother was many things, stubborn, careful, endlessly patient, but she wasn't reckless. If she said she had a plan, it meant she'd thought it through. Still, the fear sat like a stone in my throat. Hours passed slowly. Every sound outside made me jump. Every car door slamming felt like a prelude to the end of something. Then, around noon, a soft knock at the door startled me so badly I dropped the dish towel I was holding. Not Daniel's knock. Not the harsh pounding of a delivery worker. Gentle. Familiar. Lisa? My mother's voice, barely audible. I hurried to the door, but I didn't open it. The new deadbolt stared back at me, cold and impenetrable. I can't, I whispered. It's locked. He changed it. I know, she said. I thought he might. There was a rustling sound, then her voice again, lower, urgent. Honey, listen. I talked to someone at the police station. Not officially, they can't break down a door without cause. But they said you need to give them a reason. Something they can document. A statement, anything that proves you're in danger. But how? I whispered, glancing over my shoulder as though Daniel might burst through the wall. He took my phone. You're talking to me now, aren't you? She said gently. Use the old one. Walk to a window and show me your face. I'll take a picture. They said that can help. They said the look on your face might be enough. Her words hit me harder than I expected. The look on my face. What did I even look like anymore? I moved to the window slowly, hands shaking. I lifted the old phone. My reflection in the glass startled me, pale, hollow-eyed, shoulders hunched like I was permanently bracing for impact. My mother gasped softly from outside. Oh, sweetheart. She lifted her own phone and snapped a photo. I'm taking this to the police, she said. Don't panic. I won't say anything that puts you at risk. But they need to know. They told me they might send someone to do a welfare check, something casual, nothing that will alarm him. They just need permission. Permission from who? I whispered. From me, she said. Because you're my daughter. And I'm telling them I'm worried. A tear slipped down my cheek. What if he comes home while you're gone? I'll be quick, she promised. Stay close to the window. Keep your phone hidden. I love you. And then she was gone. I paced the living room for what felt like hours, listening for tires on gravel, for footsteps, for anything that meant rescue, or danger, was near. The sunlight crawled across the floor. My heartbeat never slowed. Then, around 2 in the afternoon, I heard something. A car pulling up. Not Daniel's engine. Something lighter. A knock followed. Firmer this time. Not loud, but official. Ma'am? A male voice said. This is local police. Just a wellness check. Are you able to come to the door? Panic shot through me. If Daniel found out, it would be catastrophic. But if I didn't respond, they might leave. My mother's plan would fall apart. I stepped toward the door, heart in my throat. I can't open it, I said. The lock was changed. Understood. The officer said calmly. Can you show yourself through a window? I walked to the front window again. He stepped back slightly when he saw me, just enough for me to know what he saw wasn't good. Ma'am, he said quietly, if you're in immediate danger, nod once. I didn't nod. I couldn't. If Daniel somehow found out a police officer had been here, he would. I blinked rapidly instead, hoping he understood. His expression tightened. We'll be stepping away now, he said clearly, loud enough that anyone listening from inside might hear. Sorry to bother you. Wrong address. My knees buckled. They were leaving. But the officer slipped something under the door before he walked away. A card. Plain. White. With a handwritten note across the back. We're coming back with a court order. Stay in the living room. Don't run. I clutched the card to my chest. Minutes later, the door handle clicked. Not the police. Not my mother. Daniel. He walked in slowly, closing the door behind him with a soft, ominous finality. You look shaken, he said, tilting his head. Something happened while I was gone. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breath. He took a step closer. Lisa, he said, his voice almost tender. You wouldn't lie to me, would you? The card in my hand felt hot, like it might burn through my skin. And then he reached into his pocket. For what, I didn't know. But the look in his eyes told me one thing. If I didn't get out soon, I might not get out at all. He reached into his pocket slowly, deliberately, as if he wanted me to feel every second of fear tightening in my chest. My mind jumped to a dozen conclusions at once, none of them good, all tangled together so tightly that all I could do was stand frozen, staring at his hand as it disappeared into the dark fabric of his jacket. When he finally pulled something out, it wasn't a weapon. It was my primary phone. He held it between his thumb and forefinger, swinging it lightly like a teacher dangling a confiscated note. You've been quiet today, he said. Not your usual self. That worries me. Worries me. That phrase again, bending concern into accusation. I forced a breath. I just didn't sleep well. Didn't sleep well? He repeated, taking another step toward me. Or did something interrupt your day? His eyes were sharp, dissecting every twitch of my face. My palms were so sweaty the card hidden behind my back felt like it might dissolve. The police had said they'd come back with a court order. How long would that take? An hour? 2? Could I survive 2 hours in this house with him sensing something was wrong? Daniel slipped the phone into his other hand and tapped the screen lazily, though I knew he had checked every app, every message, every notification. Funny thing, he said. When I left this morning, I had a feeling. A gut instinct. Like when you see storm clouds gathering on the horizon. You just know something's coming. I took a step back without realizing it. He noticed. Lisa, he said softly. Come here. He opened his arms slightly, like he wanted an embrace. Like I was supposed to walk into him willingly. But my feet felt glued to the carpet. His expression flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. A shadow of something ugly passed through his eyes. You're afraid of me, he said, the words almost gentle, as though he were observing weather patterns rather than destroying the ground beneath me. He closed the distance between us himself, slow and steady, a predator making sure its prey didn't run too soon. You weren't afraid before, he murmured. So why now? What happened today? He reached out, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear in a gesture so tender it made my stomach twist. That was always the worst part, the sudden tenderness, the illusion of safety right when things were about to get dangerous. The way he could make affection feel like a threat. His hand slid down my cheek, his thumb resting under my jaw. Lisa, he whispered. Look at me. I did. I had to. His grip tightened, just enough to make the pressure known. If there's something you're hiding, he said, something you're not telling me, you should say it now. I swallowed. There's nothing. The lie felt like a stone dropping into deep water. His eyes narrowed. His thumb pressed harder under my jaw, tilting my head up. Not enough to bruise. Just enough to remind me he controlled even the angle of my gaze. Then, suddenly, he let go. Stepped back. Exhaled slowly. Maybe I'm overreacting, he said. Maybe you're just tired. Maybe everything is fine. He walked past me toward the kitchen, humming again in that eerie way he sometimes did when he was restraining himself. I stayed rooted in place, too frightened to move. He opened the refrigerator. Dinner, he said. That's what we should focus on. A nice dinner. Why don't you make something simple? Something comforting. That helps you calm down, doesn't it? My pulse hammered so loudly I couldn't hear my own thoughts. Lisa, he said without turning. Answer me. Yes. I said. Yes, what? Yes. I'll cook. Good girl. Something inside me recoiled at those words. Not because they were new, but because I finally heard them for what they were, commands dressed in affection. I moved toward the kitchen in automatic motions. Pull out the pan. Wash my hands. Open the cabinet. The normalcy of it felt grotesque, like performing a ritual while my world was collapsing quietly around me. The card was still hidden behind me, pressed against the waistband of my pants. I couldn't let him see it. I couldn't let him find it. If he did. I forced myself to breathe slowly. The police were coming back. They had promised. I just had to survive until then. Just hold on. Daniel leaned against the counter, watching me chop vegetables. His presence pressed on me like a weight. Every time the knife hit the cutting board, I flinched, terrified he'd interpret it as aggression or disrespect or something I couldn't even predict. You know, he said casually, people are always trying to interfere in marriages. Friends, family, strangers online. They don't understand what we have. They don't understand how much you need me. My grip tightened on the knife. He continued, unaware, or maybe enjoying, how I stiffened. They want to poison you. Plant doubts. But I won't let them. I am your protection, Lisa. I am the only one who understands you. He walked behind me, trailing a fingertip along my spine. My entire body locked up. We don't need anyone else, he whispered. A horn honked outside. I froze. Daniel's head snapped up. Who's that? I shrugged, trying to look confused. Maybe a neighbor. He moved toward the window, parting the curtain with 2 fingers. A beige sedan was parked across the street. My heart thudded. It was the same sedan I'd seen earlier, the one the officer had stepped out of. Daniel frowned. Do you know that car? No, I said quickly. I don't. He watched it for a moment longer, then let the curtain fall. People park wherever they want these days, he muttered. No respect. He walked away, but tension radiated off him like heat. Minutes passed. I cooked mechanically. He paced. Then, to my horror, the sedan door opened. Someone stepped out. Daniel's posture went rigid. What the hell? A woman this time. Not my mother. A uniformed officer. She walked toward our house casually, like someone coming to ask about a lost dog. Nothing threatening. Nothing urgent. A non-emergency welfare follow-up. Just as the officer had implied. A soft knock sounded on the door. Daniel stiffened. Stay here. He strode toward the door, anger snapping at his heels. I watched him from the kitchen doorway, barely breathing. He opened it only an inch. Can I help you? Hello? The officer said cheerfully. Just following up on a wellness inquiry from a relative. Nothing serious. Just need to verify everyone's okay. My blood ran cold. No. No, this was too direct. Daniel would. A wellness inquiry? He repeated, voice flat. From who? I'm not authorized to disclose that, she said calmly. It's just standard procedure. May I speak with your wife for a moment? Daniel's grip tightened on the door. My wife is fine. Of course, she said. I'll just speak with her myself to confirm. No, he said sharply. The officer shifted her weight. Sir, refusing a wellness check can escalate the situation. It's just a minute. She's resting, he snapped. Then he slammed the door. I covered my mouth with both hands, heart in my throat. The silence that followed was suffocating. Then, another knock. Firmer. Sir, you need to allow us access. Daniel glared at the door, then spun toward me. Did you contact someone? No, I whispered. Don't lie to me, Lisa. I didn't, I pleaded. I didn't, I swear. He stalked toward me, fury tightening every muscle in his body. The knocking continued, louder now, accompanied by a voice raised just enough to be heard through the door. We will return with a warrant if you do not cooperate. Daniel's face twisted. They have no right. No right to invade our home. He grabbed my wrist so hard I gasped. Tell me right now, did you ask for help? I shook my head frantically. No, Daniel, please. He dragged me toward the hallway. If they come back, you will tell them nothing. You will tell them everything is fine. If you don't... A sudden sound cut him off. A car door slamming. Another. Voices outside. Multiple voices. Daniel froze. What? He whispered. I knew. My mother. She'd brought someone else. Maybe the officer from before. Maybe more. The doorknob turned. Not forced, just tested. Daniel's breath went ragged. Don't move, he hissed, releasing my wrist and stepping back toward the living room, eyes darting like a trapped animal. The voices outside grew clearer. Ma'am, please step back. I'm not leaving until I know she's safe. Ma'am, we understand, but... Just open the door. My mother. She was right outside. And Daniel was right beside me. And the house felt like a live wire, one spark away from disaster. Then someone knocked again, not gentle, not official. My mother's voice, cracking with fear. Lisa, honey, open the door. Please. Daniel turned, eyes blazing. And I realized. Whatever happened next would change everything. For a moment, everything held still. Even the air felt trapped, caught between the force of my mother's voice outside and the dangerous calm radiating from Daniel beside me. He stood like a statue carved out of anger, chest tight, jaw locked, eyes narrowed to slits. I could hear his breathing, shallow, clipped, each inhale like a warning. My mother knocked again, harder this time. Lisa! I know you can hear me. Honey, please, say something. Daniel's head snapped toward the door, then back to me. You're not going anywhere, he whispered. Do you understand? I nodded without meaning to. I didn't trust my legs. I didn't trust my voice. I didn't trust the pounding in my chest that felt like it might give me away even through the walls. Outside, a second voice, one of the officers, spoke firmly. Ma'am, please step back. We'll handle this. No, my mother said, voice shaking but unbroken. You don't understand. He won't let her answer. He won't. Ma'am, the officer repeated. We need space to proceed. Proceed with what? Daniel hissed under his breath. They have no right. None. Then came another knock on the door, this time a slow, purposeful one. Sir, a male voice said. This is Officer Ramirez. We'd like to speak with your wife. We're not leaving until we do. Daniel's expression cracked, just a hairline fracture, but enough to see something else underneath. Panic. Real panic. He wasn't worried about losing face. He was worried about losing control. He turned toward the hallway, as if debating whether to hide me somewhere, shove me inside a closet, drag me out of sight. His eyes scanned the house like he was calculating escape routes. Another knock. Louder. Mr. Clark, open the door. He flinched. Flinched. I had never seen him flinch before. Stay here, he bit out, and started toward the door. But something in me tightened, hard and sudden, an instinct I hadn't felt in years. A voice, small but alive, telling me. If he opens that door alone, this ends badly. For you. Maybe for her. Maybe for all of you. My heart thundered. The officers didn't have a warrant yet, as far as I knew. My mother might push her way in, but Daniel, he was unpredictable when cornered. I took one step after him. Then another. He didn't notice. I think he was too consumed by fury and fear to realize I was moving. He turned the deadbolt, cracked the door 3 inches, and pressed himself into the gap, blocking the view inside. What do you want? He snapped. Sir, step aside, the officer said. We need visual confirmation that your wife is okay. She's fine. Sir? She's fine, Daniel growled. And she doesn't want to talk to you. My mother's voice rose behind the officers. Let me see her! Daniel, let me! Ma'am, the officer warned again. Please stand back. I edged closer, pulse shaking through every inch of me. I could see the sliver of daylight through the doorway, the outline of the officers, my mother's shadow shifting anxiously behind them. Daniel pressed himself harder against the doorframe. This is harassment. You have no reason to. Actually, the officer cut in. We do. A pause. A beat of tension that made my entire body stiffen. What reason? Daniel spat. Your wife's mother provided evidence of potential distress, he said calmly. We also have documented refusal of access earlier today. That's sufficient cause to continue the welfare check. I told you she's resting. Then let her tell us that herself. No. The officer exhaled through his nose. Sir, please don't make this difficult. Daniel's breath quickened. He was losing ground, losing his grip on the situation. I saw his hand clench on the doorframe, knuckles whitening. My mother tried to shove forward again. Lisa! Honey, please just show your face. Ma'am, you need to stay behind the car, another officer said more firmly. I stood right behind Daniel now. Close enough to touch him. Close enough to push past him, if I dared. He still didn't realize I was there. Sir? The officer repeated. Move aside. No, Daniel snapped. You don't get to walk into my house because some overprotective woman is having a panic attack. I saw my mother's face then, just barely, just for a moment, over Daniel's shoulder, past the narrow opening of the doorway. Her eyes were wild, terrified, searching the darkness behind him. She saw me. A flicker of recognition. A flicker of horror. Because I wasn't hiding anymore. I was standing there, my face pale in the shadows, unmistakably present. Lisa! She cried. Lisa, come here. Daniel stiffened. He turned. And this was the moment I'd been terrified of. The moment he realized I had moved. That I had approached the door. That I was no longer in the place he left me. His expression snapped from shock to fury in a single heartbeat. What the hell are you doing? He hissed. My throat closed. I couldn't answer. Couldn't breathe. Daniel lunged for my arm, grabbing it so tightly my vision blurred. But behind him, the officer saw everything. Sir? He barked. Step away from her. Now. Daniel didn't. He tightened his grip, pulling me backward. My mother screamed. Sir, the officer repeated. Release her. Immediately. Get off my property. Daniel yelled, dragging me further behind the door, trying to slam it shut. But the officer jammed his boot into the gap. Mr. Clark, he growled, you are obstructing a welfare check. If you do not release your wife, we will force entry. Try it, Daniel snarled. He tugged harder, pulling me toward the hallway. In that moment, panicked, shaking, desperate, I did the only thing I could think of. I screamed. Not a word, not a plea, just a raw, instinctive sound that tore out of me like it had been trapped for 10 years. Everything exploded at once. The officers shoved the door inward. Daniel shouted. My mother cried out. I stumbled forward, nearly falling as his grip slipped. Get your hands off her! The officer's voice cut through the air like a blade. Daniel lunged again, but another figure, Officer Ramirez, was already inside, stepping between us, one hand raised in warning. Sir, don't, she said sharply. Daniel hesitated, but only for a fraction of a second. His eyes darted between the officers, the door, the windows, the hallway, calculating, searching for a way to reassert control. Then his voice dropped into a low growl. She's my wife. She's a person. Ramirez shot back. And she doesn't belong to you. He took one step toward her. She unclipped her radio. Dispatch, we have an active obstruction. Request additional units. Possible domestic disturbance escalation. Daniel froze. For the first time since I'd known him, he truly froze. It was over. He knew it. I knew it. My mother rushed past the officers and pulled me into her arms. I nearly collapsed against her, trembling so violently I felt like my bones would break apart. "It's okay," she whispered into my hair. "You're okay. I've got you." Daniel stood there, chest heaving, face twisted between rage and disbelief. As if he couldn't fathom how the script had changed. How the control had slipped from his fingertips. How the world had shifted out from under him. The officers positioned themselves between him and us, guiding me gently toward the door. "You're coming with me," my mother said, clutching me tighter. "Right now." I nodded. I couldn't speak. Couldn't think. Could only let myself be guided, one step at a time. Behind us, Daniel shouted something, words I couldn't fully process, a slurry of denial, outrage, possessiveness. But I didn't turn around. The daylight hit my face as we stepped outside. A breeze brushed my skin, a small, gentle thing, but it felt like the first touch of freedom I'd had in years. I took another step. And another. And for the first time in a decade, the doorway behind me wasn't a threshold into confinement. It was the entrance to escape. But the story wasn't done. Leaving him wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a different kind of struggle. Because freedom, I would soon learn, comes with its own kind of shadows. The officers didn't let my mother take me far, not at first. They needed a statement. Documentation. A clear record of what they'd witnessed inside the house. They ushered us to the sidewalk, keeping Daniel contained behind them while more units arrived. I sat in the back seat of a patrol car with the door open, my mother beside me, her hand wrapped around mine like she was afraid I might slip through her fingers. A paramedic checked my vitals. Asked if I had injuries. I shook my head. Nothing visible. Nothing they could photograph easily. But inside my chest, everything felt bruised. The officers asked questions in careful, measured tones, never pushing, never rushing, just giving me space to speak. At first, I could only manage short answers. Yes, he took my phone. Yes, he locked me inside. Yes, I was scared. I said the words woodenly, like someone else had placed them in my mouth. But as the minutes passed, the numbness began to crack. I remember the moment it happened, the moment I actually dissolved. An officer asked, "Has he ever restricted your movements before today?" And something in me shattered. I started crying in a way I hadn't cried since I was a child, ugly, uncontrollable sobs that tore loose from some deep, starved place. My mother held me, stroking my hair, whispering, "It's okay, sweetheart. It's okay. You're safe. You're safe now." Over and over until the words settled against me like a blanket. Eventually, I found the strength to straighten up and breathe. When I did, one of the officers, a woman around my age, knelt down beside me. "Lisa," she said gently, "we're going to file for an emergency protective order tonight. He won't be able to come near you." I stared at her, stunned. "Tonight?" She nodded. "Tonight." Those words felt unreal. Impossible. Protective order. Against Daniel. Against the man I'd once believed was my destiny. They detained him for questioning shortly after. He didn't go quietly. I didn't watch, but I heard it, the sharp rise of his voice, the frantic denials, the accusations thrown like stones. But none of that mattered anymore. The officers stood between us. My mother stood beside me. And for the first time in 10 years, I wasn't the one being cornered. Later, they offered to take me to a shelter, but my mother insisted I come home with her. They agreed under one condition: I stay somewhere safe, with a protective order in place. My mother nodded fiercely. "She's coming with me. She's not spending one more minute alone." She didn't let go of my hand the entire drive. My childhood home felt both familiar and foreign. The same kitchen wallpaper. The same creaking hallway. The same faint scent of laundry detergent clinging to the air. But walking inside, I realized how long it had been since I'd let myself feel comfort without consequence. My mother made tea, her answer to everything since I was small. I didn't want it, but I wrapped my hands around the mug anyway, letting the heat soak into my fingers. "You did the right thing," she said softly. I stared at the steam. "It doesn't feel right. It feels like I'm betraying him." My mother's face tightened, but not in anger. In heartbreak. "He made you believe that," she said. "He made you believe loyalty meant silence." I swallowed hard. "I thought it was love." She reached across the table and touched my cheek. "Love doesn't trap you. It doesn't shrink you. It doesn't make you disappear." Her voice wavered, just once. "I should have fought harder for you. I should have pushed more." "No," I whispered. "You tried." I didn't listen. We sat in silence for a long time. The quiet felt different here, soft instead of suffocating. A blanket, not a cage. Later that night, alone in the old guest room, I lay awake listening to every sound. A car passing. A dog barking. The hum of the refrigerator. My heartbeat. All of it felt unfamiliar, like learning a new language of safety. I didn't sleep much, but I slept some. And that was enough. Over the next weeks, everything moved quickly. The protective order was approved. Daniel was barred from contacting me or coming near my mother's home. His texts and calls, hundreds of them, spiraling from apologetic to furious, never reached me. The police documented everything. My mother changed her locks and installed cameras. She kept every scrap of paperwork in a folder labeled with my name. "I'm not letting anything slip through the cracks," she said firmly. I started therapy before the month ended. The counselor, a quiet woman with soft gray eyes, told me something in our first session I still think about. "Survival isn't just leaving the danger," she said. "It's learning to stop carrying its voice inside you." At first, I didn't know what she meant. I thought that leaving Daniel should have been enough. But in the nights that followed, I heard him everywhere. In the way I flinched at footsteps. In the way I apologized reflexively. In the way I waited, instinctively, for someone to tell me whether I was allowed to make a decision. He haunted everything even when he was gone. Healing wasn't cinematic. It wasn't linear. It was slow, uneven, filled with jagged edges. Some days I felt strong enough to breathe freely. Other days I felt like a ghost walking through my own life. My mother stayed patient. She cooked my favorite meals, left little notes on the fridge, drove me to appointments when I couldn't bring myself to get behind the wheel. I got a job eventually, part-time at first, then more hours. The first paycheck felt like holding sunlight in my hands. A tangible reminder that I could stand on my own. I bought clothes Daniel would have hated, bright ones, bold ones, pieces that made me feel like someone with a pulse again. The first time I walked out of the store wearing a deep red sweater, my mother teared up. "You look like yourself again," she said. I didn't know who myself was, not yet. But I wanted to meet her. For a long time, I avoided dating entirely. Not out of fear, though there was some of that, but because I didn't want my life to hinge on someone else again. I needed to relearn how to exist alone, how to breathe without permission. Therapy helped. Time helped. Small victories helped, unlocking the car without shaking, making choices without second-guessing, laughing without guilt. Healing didn't erase the scars. It just taught me how to live around them. As I approached 40, I realized something that stunned me with its simplicity. I was allowed to have a life that wasn't an apology. I was allowed to feel joy without looking over my shoulder. I was allowed to call my mother whenever I wanted. I was allowed to choose who I became. And slowly, quietly, I began to trust myself again. Sometimes people ask me how I finally left. How I finally broke free. They want a clean answer, some moment of dramatic clarity. But the truth is messier. I left because a stranger sent a message. I left because a decade of small cuts finally bled through. I left because my mother refused to stop knocking. I left because officers pushed open a door he tried to close forever. I left because, for the first time in years, I heard my own voice when I screamed. I left because I had to. Not to start a new life with someone else. Not to chase romance or redemption. But to save myself. And I did. I saved myself. Even if it took me too long. Even if the cost was 10 years I can't reclaim. Even if the echoes still linger when the nights are too quiet. I'm alive. I'm free. I'm healing. My mother still knocks before entering a room, even now, even here. A small thing, done out of respect rather than fear. And each time she does, I feel something in my chest loosen. Because now, when someone knocks, I don't brace myself. I breathe. And I rise. And I open the door.